is welcome, introductions and safety information. So I welcome you all. I welcome my fellow subcommittee team that have been working with me for the past few months on this, but also chairs and officers and also members of the public. This meeting is going to be webcast, and it may be good if we have a round of introductions if everybody's here. So if I start with Ian.
Good afternoon, I'm Ian Hurd from the Policy Committee team.
So I'm Abdul Malik, I'm going to be the chair, I'm the Green Councillor for Ashley Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Andy Wothery, Director of Finance.
I'm Kelvin Blake, Councillor for Hillfield and Labour representative on this committee.
Tony Dyer, leader of the Council, but also chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee.
Ed Plowden, chair of Transform Connectivity. I've got another meeting, but I wanted to come to the public forum, and then I'll be back for my slot.
Councillor Martin Fodor for Redland Ward. I'm chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee.
Councillor Jonathan Hacker, Stockwood Ward, Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you. Patrick McAllister, Councillor for Hotwells and Harbourside, just member of the committee.
Councillor Andrew Brown, I'm a member of the committee, but I also am chair of the Economy and Schools Policy Committee, so I've got two hats today.
Thank you. So any members that are late, when they start to speak, I'm sure they will introduce themselves. Can I go to officers?
Thank you. Sarah Chokovic, Head of Financial Management and Deputy 151.
Good afternoon, John Smith, Executive Director, Growth and Regeneration.
Good afternoon, Alex Hearn, Director, Economy of Place.
Good afternoon, Sean Taylor, Head of Highways.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. Ben.
Hello, Ben Hegarty, Finance Business Partner for Growth and Regeneration.
Good afternoon, Pete Anderson, Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself? Thank you. So that concludes the welcome and introductions. I'd just like to go through some safety information. So in the event that we have to evacuate in an emergency, the alarm will obviously sound and you'll have to leave the room calmly via the lobby area and main door of the City Hall. Turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. Item number 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence and any substitutions. I don't think we have any apologies today, but we do have a member who said that they may be late.
Yeah, I think Councillor Mack is going to be late. Nick Hibbard has also sent his apologies, but he may be joining us later.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item 3, which is declaration of interest. Is there any members that have any interest to declare in relation to the business included in today's agenda? Councillor Hacker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm a non-executive director of Bristol Waste, and I think that's relevant to environment and sustainability.
Noted, Councillor Hacker. Councillor Blake.
Yep, thank you. I'm a non-exec director on the board of North Bristol NHS Trust. Some of the implications of the finances could have an impact on them, and I'm chair of Second Step, and they receive some funding from the council as well.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Dyer.
I'm a trustee of the Bristol Museum Development Trust.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Anybody else? No? If not, that takes us to item 4 on the agenda, which is public forum. So we're going to allocate 30 minutes to the public forum item. Of those 30 minutes, we're going to give 15 minutes to questions and 15 minutes to statements. The questions and replies will have been circulated to committee members and published on the website in advance of the meeting alongside the agenda papers. So each questioner is permitted to ask up to two oral supplementary questions. That's in total. So if you've submitted 3 questions, you're only going to be able to ask 2 as a single person that's asked those 3 questions, if I'm correct. A supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. So, for instance, an entirely fresh question on a different subject will not be allowed or permitted. Depending on the content of the supplementary questions, it may be necessary for a follow-up reply to be sent to the questioner, so it could be that we have to get that in writing for you. So if I turn to the public questions, we have 5 individuals that asked 12 different questions. So questions 1, 2 and 3 come from Diane Pocock and are reference to reablement team. Do we have Diane here today? No, we don't. So if I go to question 4, and that's from Catherine. Is Catherine here today? No. So I will now go to questions 5 and 6 from Elizabeth Ind. Is Elizabeth Ind here today? No. So then we go to question 7 from Katie Taylor. Is Katie here today? Success.
Hi, I'm Katie, Bristol Women's Voice. Thanks for your response on the question was about kind of cuts to care and how that might then unduly impact on unpaid carers, which we know are disproportionately women. And so just sort of wondering, making sure that hasn't happened, and what you've replied is around that there will be an assessment, where are we? The entitlement for all carers to have a carers assessment. Some of the women that we speak with who are doing unpaid care will talk about how carers assessments will only ever kind of document the hours of care that is needed sort of in addition to the care that they're already doing. So the unpaid care that they're already doing doesn't necessarily, isn't automatically included in the care assessment. So the care assessment, for example, might say that a person requires, say, 2 hours worth of care, but actually what that might mean is they're not counting the 6 hours that the carer is already doing. Hopefully I'm making sense. So can you provide a reassurance that the care assessments will also include an accurate documentation of the unpaid care hours that are already being done?
Carers. I think we're going to get a written response to that question. We've noted the question down because it seems that the chair is not here at the moment. Maybe if officers, is there any officers that could reply to that particular question? Alex or John? Tony?
Councillor Mallett, I think because this meeting is split over 2 days, the chair is going to be here tomorrow. The relevant officers will be also here tomorrow. But what I can do is to ensure Katie, I will ensure that a response is sent to her as quickly as possible.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. It's one of the asks that we have as part of our kind of Caring Economy Manifesto, which directly comes from what women are telling us.
Okay, so
second question.
Second question.
Yes,
yep.
On the next
okay.
question, question 8. Is that on the next question? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. On the equalities impact assessment. So on question 8 was also from me.
Yes, and so was question 9.
Second question. Great, thank you. Thanks again for your response. The response that you gave was kind of related to the proposed cuts in future, and I recognise they don't impact on current service provision, but the future cuts to domestic violence services in Bristol. My question, however, related to the whole of the cuts that are proposed, so the cuts to care that I've outlined in my previous question, but also the potential cuts to domestic violence. My question suggested that we're concerned that the cuts will have a disproportionate impact on women who are carers, as well as those who are, experiencing domestic violence. And what I couldn't find, or what I wanted to know about, was about the equalities impact assessment that's been done on the proposed cuts, and whether that equalities impact assessment has, as per good practice, included an assessment of the cumulative impact, the intersectional impact, and the impact of individuals as well as households, and the impact on unpaid care. The response came back around domestic violence services, but my question was related to all of the cuts, particularly those across the care sector. So I wonder if you could answer that question in relation to what I meant, please.
Yep, so with regards to equalities impact assessment, we have 650 pages of equality impact assessments, as you know, that have been attached to the saving proposals, and we will look to the appropriate department to get that to you in a reply. I think that would only be fair, because it's a very complex issue and it's important that we get the right information to you. So question number 8 was from yourself, and 9 as well, and we've addressed your supplementary questions. So is Rachel Fagan here for questions 10, 11 and 12? Thank you. So you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions for all 3 of your questions.
Okay, so if we start with question number 10 and the answer that was provided, it's really totally avoidant. This is smoke and mirrors. It says in the draft general funding savings proposal document that you are going to cut 635,000 across the next 3 years. And yet what you're saying is the party line from yourselves is no currently funded project, institution, organisation or individual will have any committed funding withdrawn. But tomorrow at 4 p.m, we're actually, your words not mine, going to find out the highlights of what those cuts actually are. Philip Walker, who's one of your members of staff, head of culture, I believe, also in a document that went out to all arts organisations, said that the CIP programme is not only going to be reduced, but also closed. So my supplement question for this question, number 10, would be, can the City Council please confirm whether the Cultural Investment Programme will actually be funded when this round of funding ends in 2027-2028?
Councillor Dyer?
At present, what's been presented are options. So until we've gone through those options and then have set a budget, at this point we cannot say what is definitely going to be continued with and what is not going to be continued with. These are the options we're looking at. We'll then make a decision based on the feedback from members of the public from this committee, and also our funding options as well.
Thank you for that. Moving on to question number 11. That question was about the lack of engagement with unions, and in it there seems to be some factual errors. I hold here in my hand the letter that was sent to the City Council, which was addressed to the head of the council, also Alex Hearn, the Director of Economy of Place, and a load of other councillors, basically talking about the fact we have not had any communication from the council regarding the Bottle Yard Studios, nor to do with any of these cuts. So my supplementary question therefore would be, when is the City Council going to speak to Equity and BEC2 and the unions that represent the freelance workers that are going to be affected not only by the sale of the Bottle Yard, but also these proposed cuts?
So in relation to, my name is Alex Hearn, I'm the Director of Economy of Place. In relation to the decision around the potential sale of the Bottle Yard Studios, there has been engagement with Equity, BEC2 and the unions that directly employ council staff. The committee decision in relation to the Bottle Yard Studios was to work to identify purchasers and undertake some due diligence. That's ongoing. And a decision will be brought back to the Strategy and Resources Committee. In relation to the proposals in the budget, as Councillor Dyer has just said, they're options, and this is part of the consultation process.
Thank you.
Sorry, so that you've had your 2 questions. Thank you very much. That concludes the questions from members of the public. Public statements we come to now, and there has been 22 submitted, of which we can see that the members that are present today, I think if I go to, Tim's here as well. If I go to Councillor Tim Kent first for your statement, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short because I'm sure the committee have already read the statement. I want to sort of focus in on the proposed cuts before you. We know that the budgets for all councils are tight, and we know that councils are being asked to make difficult decisions, but I think we can avoid really bad decisions. And I think to slash our library service, to cut all of our school crossing patrol people, or to close 3 libraries would be really bad decisions. And I hope today as a committee you can recommend to the Strategy and Resources Committee, which will meet in a couple of weeks, to remove those as options for full council. I do not believe that we should be seeing a major cut to our library service. And we've already gone through that battle before at this council. I thought that issue had been settled, and I'm surprised it was brought forward as an option as a cut by officers. And I hope as councillors, as a unified voice, you can say no to that. To cut our crossing patrol people, who have already been cut to the bare minimum, who only work on roads which had already been assessed as being dangerous, it simply, to me, seems to be not only short-sighted, but to put our children in danger. So I hope for the very small saving that this would produce, that we can say no to that as well. Then when we come to the 3 museums, there must be better options than just saying we're going to lock the doors on these museums. Number one, that doesn't make the costs go away for those buildings. It doesn't make the costs go away for having to look after those collections. 2, have we explored other options? A trust, maybe the National Trust, or a local trust. There must be other options, as well as is there any other room in the budget to be able to keep those going ourselves. The idea that we will not reopen those museums is, I would have thought, totally unacceptable to us as a council. Anyway, thank you very much for hearing me. I'm going to listen to as much of the debate as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Members of the public that are present for statements, we'll come to now. So, Rachel Fagan, do you want to make... So we've received your statement, and we would have all read it. So if you want to just summarise, that would probably be...
Yes, I suppose my summary would be this, is that Equity have not been consulted about the Bottle Yard. I'm sorry, that's factually incorrect. We have not been consulted about these cuts. This affects thousands of freelance workers across this city. But also, you know, I'm a parent. I live in this city. The culture cuts that you're putting forward will absolutely obliterate the future of culture for any generation coming after this. It's so short-sighted. There are always different options to get to a same place. I understand the predicament that the City Council are in, but the way in which you are communicating these issues and going about it is not acceptable. Stop ignoring us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew Bradbury.
Yes, thank you. My brief statement is as published. It asks that in developing the budget, the Council gives thought to a potential source of additional income. Bristol is the 7th most visited destination in the UK, with nearly 1 million inbound international visitors. In addition, there's about 2 million domestic staying trips alongside 13.6 million day trips. Bristol accounts for about 50% of the total visitor economy of the west of England. Whilst I understand that councils in England do not currently have the power to introduce a tourist tax as such, according to the Metro newspaper last week, Manchester has introduced a city visitor charge, which is expected to raise £2.8 million in the 2023-24 year. Bournemouth Christchurch Pool has a £2 per night charge on certain hotels. Wales is planning to introduce levies in 2027, Liverpool is introducing a charge in 2025. Edinburgh, under different legislation, already has a transient visitor levy. Bristol Council could get on board with this approach to raising revenue. These are levies which are likely to be neither difficult to collect, now that the precedent has been set with hotel chains and other providers, nor damaging to the city's thriving visitor economy. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement. The next person on the list is, who seems to be present, Linda Rook.
Thank you. Thank you, yes. My name is Linda Rook. I am a Bristol resident and I am president of Equity UK. So behind me stand 50,000 workers in the creative industries and culture. And there's a lot of them living in this city. What is being proposed here, I do not understand. The amounts involved are meagre, to say the least. We've had repeated cuts with previous administrations of this city council, and you're coming round again. I cannot believe it. What we offer, it's not a question of either or. Investment in culture and the arts actually supports the UK economy and the Bristol economy. It supports restaurants, bars, transport. It makes this city a better place to live in. You talk about this place as being a creative, vibrant city, and you want it to be agile. But let me tell you, Arts Council England, in their last report, said that 41% of companies and organisations that were cut from funding from government have actually failed to recuperate any more funding. It's pie in the sky when you think some knight on shining armour is going to come riding through and offer substitute funding. It doesn't exist. A few years ago, Bristol Old Vic Theatre closed its doors and there was no funding coming through from those areas. It came back through from Arts Council England and a small amount from Bristol City Council, but nowhere else apart from a few little individual donations, but they were small. So it's about actually identifying what you want from this city. Invest. It's Keynesian economics. You invest and you grow. You don't cut, because then you will wither. Be proud of your city. Act for it. And on your heads be it if you decide to cut this final amount. I'm still not hearing that 2027 and beyond there will be any cultural funding from this city. Shame on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for that passionate summary of your statement. Can I now come to David Redgewell, please?
Thank you. I'm the pasture representative of the Western Union Combined Authority and North Somerset Bus Service Advisory Panel, to be clear, speaking today. You are the council responsible with South Gloucestershire, with Baines and partly with North Somerset for providing the transport levy under the WEPA Act that governs a joint service on public bus services and public transport. That levy has been frozen for the last 3 or 4 years. Now, I welcome the work that Plowden and Tim Ripington are trying to do to bring the CAS money across to keep bus services running. But at the moment, we're faced at the moment in the Metro Mayors, and he doesn't have precepting powers like every other combined authority in the country. He relied on the unitary authorities to fund the joint service. We're under threat of having to remove more bus services if we don't get the levy at a reasonable rate to maintain bus services in North Bristol, East Bristol. And that's on top of the good work. I am very proud of what and Plowden's doing to try and recuperate bus services in South Bristol and Tim Ripington. They're doing an excellent piece of work. But without the levy, those buses won't run. There's no magic bullet in the commercial market for buses, the market failure. That's why the government wants to franchise and municipalise them. But that will not happen immediately. And the power will not be with this council. This is not the Transport Authority and never will be. That will go to the Combined Authority. It is now. And that's, if you see the new Commission White Paper, that's exactly where it's all going. So we're extremely concerned that people need to get work, to jobs, employment, tourism we've just mentioned, the nighttime economy, the city needs to function. Without a public transport system, how do people get to work, school, college and employment? And that is a function of funding. You're not the authority to provide, although Ed is doing a good job because he's stepping in. You're not the functioning authority to provide the service. WECA is, but they need to be funded until we get a precepting power, until we bring North Somerset in and we get WECA out of special measures and possibly bring Gloucestershire in, which is where we're possibly going in the journey in the future with Angela Rayner. In the meantime, I'm worried it will be different next 2 years. Now, the same question is being put by transport users to South Gloucestershire County Council, to Baines and to North Somerset for joint arrangements. But there are ways of helping. You can, of course, put car parking charges up, which we would fully support. We'd also support you going to Secretary of State and asking to put the CAS money up. And we'd also ask to make sure you charge for the Downs. One of the biggest tourist attractions in South West England, from Cornwall to Tewkesbury to Bournemouth and Poole, which is mentioned, we have free car parking, was one of the massive tourist attractions in the South West region, and nobody pays a penny, and it's uncontrolled. Now, you know, these are simple things. My colleague behind me put back, we've been saying to Mayor, to Bath, to Bristol, bring in a tourist tax. Then we can keep museums open, we can pay for culture and leisure. We've been saying it for 3 years. It's not moved. It's just not moved in these authorities. And a tourism tax is in place in many places, and it's legal. And the Metro Mayor can start to make it happen working with Bath. You don't have to slice and cut everything to pieces in what is one of the regional capital cities. We thrive on tourism. So let's just shut the museums, let's just make the transport worse, and we need to employ people. You know, these are jobs, employment, services. And transport matters amongst that whole function, including transport for the economy. So we do need to look at revenue growth. We can't allow people to say we won't pay extra car parking charges if we're about to make modal shift, if we're about to reduce the amounts of traffic in the city, which we need to do through the air quality and the city region. And we've got to be much, much more collective in the city region. I mean, we still operate like 4 parish councils. We need to act like the city region. I've said this to Councillor Dyer. You know, we need to act like this.
Okay, David.
Evolution is very important. But cutting that, the other thing we would oppose is actually charging disabled people.
David, can I ask you to conclude now, please? Thanks.
It's to not charge disabled people in car parks and to park in bays. And the case, of course, would be against the removal of the school traffic controls. But transport's very important, and the function but is with you, but WEC has responsibility.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Thank you for your passion, continued passion. Can I ask if there's anybody present here from the public that has made a statement that we haven't come to, because we do have the list just in case, just to make sure. If not, then that concludes the business of public forum. So thank you very much for everybody that's contributed to the public forum today. We'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the main part of today's business. So item number 5 is the budget and medium-term financial planning 25-26, developing saving proposals, general fund and housing revenue account. This is the main part of today's business. The report titled 25-26 Budget and Medium-Term Financial Planning, Development, Saving Proposals, General Fund and Housing Revenue Account was attached to the papers and is part of the bundle. In a moment, I'll ask Andy Rothery, who's the Council's Director of Finance, to introduce the report. But firstly, and particularly for the benefit of the members of public, both in the gallery and at home, I just want to briefly set the context for our discussion and to be clear about the role of the Finance Subcommittee at this meeting. The report before us provides details on the scale of the very significant General Fund budget challenge faced by the Council and the saving proposals that are being developed to manage the General Fund financial gap. The report also outlines the Housing Revenue Account financial challenge and the related developing saving proposals. I would like to stress the importance of balancing the Council's budget. This is a legal requirement for council tax setting and an essential step in the financial management of the Council to ensure that we live within our means. For all under councils under financial stress, For all councils under financial stress, there remains the risk of a Section 114 notice, which is where a council publicly reports that it can no longer fund its expenditure from available income. It is imperative that we take every step to ensure that this is not the situation in Bristol City Council near future. Since the summer, updates on the scale of the financial challenge and the consequent mitigating actions have been the subject of several reports to each meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee, with regular reporting also to the individual policy committees on the financial position. The Finance Subcommittee is a standing established subcommittee of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. Since late summer and on through the autumn, the subcommittee has held a series of meetings where we have been briefed about the ongoing actions to mitigate the budget challenge, the development of the budget consultation, which was carried out over November and December, and on the development of the emerging saving proposals. As indicated on the agenda, and as per the details included in the agenda papers, the Finance Subcommittee will now review and discuss specific saving proposals across each policy committee's remit. Policy committee chairs and relevant directors and senior officers are here to respond to members' questions. At today's session, we will review saving proposals in relation to environment and sustainability, children and young people, public health and communities, economy and skills, transport and connectivity. At the end of today's session, the meeting will be adjourned and the subcommittee will then reconvene at 4 p.m. tomorrow to review the saving proposals in relation to adult social care, strategy and resources, homes and housing delivery, including the housing revenue account budget proposals. To be clear, the Finance Subcommittee's role over these two sessions is essentially to comment and make observations on the proposals. The subcommittee has no decision-making powers. Following our sessions, our comments will be reported formally to the 3rd of February meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee. On the 3rd of February, the Strategy and Resources Committee will determine the budget recommendations to be submitted to the full Council budget meeting on the 25th of February 2025. The full Council must agree a balanced budget. As we work through the meeting, I suggest it would be helpful if we can identify particularly those areas of the proposals and savings where we feel we have clear consensus in terms of being appropriate for them to be taken forward. Inevitably, there may be some differences of political view about particular proposals, in which case we will need to be transparent about this and may need to reference in our report that there are different political views on some aspects of those proposals. We must all bear in mind and keep at the forefront of our considerations, however, that all of the identified saving proposals presented here are required, so they're required currently to assist the ultimate delivery of a balanced budget. I now ask Andy Rothery to introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor Malek. So I think Councillor Maлек's highlighted the challenges in local government funding, and this can be seen in the papers today. So the financial strategy has identified a 25-26 funding gap of 51.6 million, rising to 68.4 million over the medium term. Following the Chancellor's autumn statement and provisional local government financial settlement, the gap has been revised to 42.2 million for 25-26. As highlighted on page 10 of the report pack. Further work is underway refining the numbers for the draft budget report, and this will be coming to the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of February. There's a summary table by committee and in the report, and the detail will be reviewed too in the committee meeting today and also in the session tomorrow. This identifies 42.9 million of savings for 25-26, and over the life of the plan, going up to 84.4 million of savings. I'd also like to highlight the HRA position. Against a 151 million budget, there's an in-year forecast deficit of just under £14 million. This has been considered in the HRA Emerging Business Plan, and how this overspend will be managed. Well, some of it is one-off pressures being felt in year. There's a proposal of 8 million savings to bring the HRA back into balance. The appendices include the detail of the savings proposals and supporting quality impact assessments. So in the pack, the savings start on page 15, going on to 28, and we've got the supplementary documents, including the EQIAs and the HRA detail. Chair, I think they're the main headlines that I wanted to cover. I'm conscious we've got a lot to get through today, so I think that's my summary of the paper.
So I'm now going to go to each of the policy areas, but before I do that, I just want to say that the screens will be used to display the reports and the proposals, the saving proposals. I'm not sure that we can blow them up more than what the screen size is, and that's about the maximum we're going to be able to do for today. So each policy area is going to be given 15 minutes, but there are going to be some people that will finish early and some that will be needing extra time. I'm hoping that we can take a break in between. This may be about 3:30, if that's okay. Councillor Logan, did you want to say something? Sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question on the level of ultimate detail that will be presented. I'm very aware that we've been through a series of PowerPoint presentations, and this is the first time that those are public, but generally that information is quite high level. We've had a presentation on the high level revenue impacts, the funding savings gap, and we've had the presentations on the individual items which we'll discuss today, but we haven't really seen the homework underneath that. And I'm particularly concerned about the HRA business plan in that respect. When we discuss those issues tomorrow, there are a number of assumptions and choices underneath the assumptions that I think when these reports go to the Strategy and Resources Committee or to full council, those decisions and assumptions need to be more evident than they have been in the summary so far. And will we see that later?
So in terms of today's meeting, we've got 5 policy areas that we're looking at. 5 of the policy areas chairs are going to be here. You have officers here as well. The papers have been published as they are setting out the proposals. We've seen quite a bit in our private sessions, as you say. I mean, if there's any other further details that you require or that you need, you can always contact the policy chair, but also the officers who would be more than willing to provide that. But I think there is sufficient information here for the public domain and for members to understand the saving proposal options that we're going to be talking about today. So I hope that answers your question. But if there is any further detail that you require, that I'm pretty sure that you can get that information from email. Councillor McAllister, did you want to say something? Sorry, before.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a related point, but just before we get into the policy areas, I did just want to flag a concern I had with the way some of the EQIAs were being presented. Other members may have found it similarly, and I felt when we're dealing with huge numbers of chained EQIAs, there's a lot of repetition between the documents. I think for sort of readability, frankly, as well as conciseness, it might be good in future if we could try and get those with maybe an opening summary of all the shared information. I don't think we needed to read that the Southwest has a high 5-year survival rate for businesses, 500 times, for instance, with huge thanks to the hard work of the officers who put the work in to do this. I think for public accessibility, but also for the purposes of the committee scrutiny, that might be something to look into for the future.
I think there's no doubt there's things that can be done a lot better, and paperwork and spreadsheets that could be laid out a lot better than what they are at the moment. And that's the point of some of the work that we do, and we're going to be working with officers to try and resolve those issues for the future. Councillor Blake, did you want to go on?
Thank you. My comments about the quality impact assessments as well, actually. I think that often we talk about the cohort of individuals that are going to be affected by these changes, and we talk about them, and generally, in most part, it's older people and disabled people. Not generally in every area, but in most part, it's older people and disabled people that they're disproportionately affected. What we don't talk about then is the scenario in which what could happen, the alternatives. What may happen if, for instance, a cut particularly takes place? What's the alternative? What will happen to those individuals? What have you considered in that? We don't go into that space, and I find that a bit, it's sort of lacking of information that essentially would be a richer sort of area for us to consider. So it's, for me, it goes part of the way to talk about who's going to be impacted, but what it doesn't say is potentially what that impact is and the likely outcome for those individuals and what scenarios we've considered when we've looked at the impact. So I think it's a general point, but I will make specific points as we go through the various areas. And I think we can definitely improve on understanding the impacts of these of all these proposals on the cohort of individuals that receive these services.
I appreciate those comments, Councillor Blake, and there's no doubt huge value in those EQI documents, but they need to be improved. I agree, but I think that's a discussion for the wider way that the council operates and the documents that they have and adopt that are kind of consistently used across the country as well. I see the same type of formats, but I suppose we could be doing things a bit better in Bristol. If there's no more comments, let me quickly go to our main thrust of what we'll be discussing today. And so the first policy area or policy committee that we're going to be talking about is environment and sustainability. There is 50 minutes, but as I said, there's reasonable adjustment within that, and we will be taking a break at round about 3:30. So let's see how it goes. Councillor Fodor.
Yes. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. There's quite detailed information in the EQIA about the proposals to consult on service changes on recycling and waste. It starts at page 299, for those who aren't at the right page. I suppose my first point is, are there specific questions? Because that's probably the most useful sort of way to proceed. Or do you wish me to introduce something?
Do you want to go through the main budget options that you see that are a priority, that are talked about, and then obviously we were open to other members to contribute?
Sure. The main service budget that the Environment and Sustainability Committee does have is the Waste and Recycling Service, which is about £44 million, and it is growing and likely to continue to escalate due to additional regulatory pressures, which will put up the cost of handling waste. At the moment, about 45% of the material that people put out is recycled, and that goes to market, and those markets help to fund that collection service. However, the majority at the moment has been stagnant, slightly falling recycling rate, unfortunately, the last few years, and it is a growing cost, as I said. So the plan is to consult on potential service changes. Nothing's been decided yet. There's been extensive discussion with committee members about the detail and the presentation of those potential changes, which could be to move from a 2-weekly to potential 3-weekly or 4-weekly black bin collection, but also to provide a larger capacity for recycling, additional support for large households, additional support for those with absorbent hygiene products or nappies and so on, additional rollout of promotion and education, and additional food waste recycling capacity, because we do want to get the food waste and the recyclables out of the black bins. And there will be no reduction in capacity in the proposals that we'll be bringing forward, and that's made clear in the EQIA. And there will be, of course, support for people with assisted collection needs, and as said, potentially for larger households or those with young babies or hygiene products that need to be kept separate. So I hope that's helpful.
It is. I will open in a minute, but I'd just like to ask whether the implementation or the potential of looking at innovation and maybe modelling things on neighbouring councils and authorities, seeing where there's good practice in terms of recycling and especially, trying to mitigate the amount of costs associated with recycling. Have you looked into any of that, and would that be coming forward as potential good news for us?
Yes, there's been a sort of careful look at neighbouring authorities and similar authorities wherever possible, and the Welsh authorities that have a much higher recycling rate, much higher diversion of material to market across Wales than we have currently. The target in England is to move to 65% recycling eventually, and I say at the moment we're on 45%. So providing better storage, easier to handle storage, larger containers, ones that don't break and ones that are easier to empty, slightly simpler handling of the materials so that it can be taken back and processed to go to market. We've looked at other authorities extensively to try and understand that, and we've also looked at the outcome of potential less frequent waste collections, the residual waste, and reducing the frequency does tend to be a significant factor in increasing the recycling rate, provided you provide that additional support, capacity and information education to help people to recycle more.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fodor. Now open for Finance Committee subgroup questions. So, Councillor McAllister first. Sorry, Councillor Blake first. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, there are some, would be helpful, first of all, right? So there are a couple of interesting suggestions around savings, around the getting our bills down. So a helpful suggestion. I think that's really good. The tax exemption stuff that we're looking at, that's helpful and really good. The big issue on this one is a black bin collection. Let's be honest, £1 million savings suggesting. Question I had, two things. One, is that based, what that figure is based on, we haven't been told. Is it a 4-weekly collection or is it a 3-weekly collection? Is that underlying figure based on, is it 3-week or 4-weekly collections? Second question related to that is about fly tipping. So real concerns that people will have is if we move to a less frequent than what we currently have now, that there potentially could be more instances of fly tipping. I get the point about more education and all the rest of it, but nevertheless, has that potential risk been modelled into these costs, and is there an assumption around an increase in fly tipping?
Okay, I think the simple answer is yes, all these eventualities have been modelled. Both 3-weekly and 4-weekly costs and savings have been modelled. The handover period, a staged handover across 3 parts of Bristol, not all in one go, has been studied to make sure it's realistic and deliverable. Fly tipping doesn't tend to associate with bin capacity or even the cost of disposing of bulky waste. A lot of it is to do with sort of rogue businesses and people who are going to fly tip anyway. I think that's actually been sort of the pattern generally. I'm not sure if we have any more information on that. The cost modelling has been quite detailed about the roll-up costs, the launch costs, the container costs to provide additional food waste bins, larger sacks potentially for putting recycling in to make it straightforward and less messy, so which should reduce litter compared to the sort of what are often open boxes that are currently in use that can get damaged. So the most likely outcome be honest, is probably 3 weekly rather than 4 weekly if there's a reduction, because we can handle that in terms of raising the recycling rate and reducing the black bin amount of waste. So there would be less in those bins, they wouldn't be as full. And if there are large households, as said, it's been modelled that there can be an additional service for people who apply with large households.
It's okay, Councillor Blake. So I'm now going to go to Councillor McAllister. I'm sorry, I missed other people who indicated to speak, so if you can just please indicate again. Thank you. Councillor Brown. Thank you. Okay.
Everyone wants a piece of Martin. Thank you, Martin. I'll continue the theme of talking about the waste collections because I think that's the really juicy item on this section of the agenda. You've talked a bit about the sort of proposal for giving people who need, who've got nappies in the household or absorbent hygiene products, that sort of thing, sort of a bespoke service. Could you talk a bit about how that would work, please, and what the experience of other places in the UK has been rolling that sort of service out? I'm a bit concerned that it would be the sort of thing where people might apply and then spend a month waiting for the collections to actually start up, and in the meantime they've got a bin bag filled with dirty nappies piling up in their kitchen.
Sure, that's a very good point. So the application process clearly needs to be as sort of straightforward and streamlined as possible. We are lucky, we're already currently in the middle of a 1-year trial with the company Pura, who are collecting up from a certain number of households nappies and absorbent hygiene products to get the cellulose and the other material recycled, the plastic recycled. So we're having local experience of working with them. Bristol Waste have been talking to them about that. So we have that current trial in the city, and I hope something similar could follow on. It isn't the only collection service in the country, but we're lucky that it has been piloted here in Bristol currently. But as you say, the rollout has to be smooth. Someone with a newborn baby should be able to apply. Someone with a medical condition should be able to apply and get the service. There could be a time-limited period for babies for a certain given period. Obviously, it's not indefinite.
Okay, thank you. That is reassuring because I think that's probably one of the biggest sticking points with this. More generally, I think we've all seen the public concern around this sort of proposal, and it's good that we've got measures to increase recycling rates and reduce the amount that would be in the back bins, and recycling bins wouldn't be collected any less frequently and all. There is good stuff here, but have we looked at other places in the UK which have done this sort of measure of reducing to a 3 weekly bin collection, say? I think we can all get behind increasing recycling or bringing recycling to new places and things like that, or nappy recycling. But what has the actual experience of other local authorities who've made this change in the past been, please?
Definitely. There have been discussions with a number of authorities, both urban and metropolitan authorities and others surrounding Bristol, about the switch over in South Gloucestershire and North Somerset, in Wales, Rhondda, Cyntaf, I think Salford in the northwest of England. I think we could probably name a few others if you want, but there's definitely quite a positive experience in that providing better recycling capacity and telling the story about recycling so people realise the value of it. It helps pay for its own service, whereas putting it in a black bin costs us money to dispose, landfill or incinerate. So it actually makes it a more viable service. But obviously we have to persuade people, and we have to let people know there are markets, all the material in Bristol that's not contaminated, all of it goes to market, and that raises income for the city. And I don't think we've been good enough at telling that story up till now, because there are other places that have been less reliable, have had material taken away by contractors, and it's turned up in the wrong place and not been recycled. So we need to make clear we are committed to that integrity in that service.
Thank you.
So I have Councillor Brown, Thomas, and then Councillor Hucker. So Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Myron. I'm going to follow on a similar theme and actually initially pick up on what Patrick's just said. I'm interested particularly in experience in other urban authorities. And I welcome, you're talking about flexibility around larger households, and I think we need to maybe look at flexibility and arrangements in areas where there's perhaps maybe multiple homes and of multiple occupation and that sort of thing, and recognise that, or tower blocks, and recognise that one size might not fit all in the sort of city, throughout the city. I want to ask about how this ties in with the overall budget setting process for Bristol Waste, because they, like us, are obviously going to have their own challenges in terms of meeting their costs, and unlike us, as I understand it, they won't have their employer national insurance, the increase in employers' national insurance compensated for, because they're an arm's length company. So how does the measures in this tie in with the sort of broader budget setting process for Bristol Waste?
Okay, so two parts to that. Well, do the second one first. So Bristol Waste Company, as a council-owned company with the ability to earn income, what's called a TECL company, yes, it's unlikely to benefit from the refund of the national insurance increase. We know there's going to be that increase, and they have to budget accordingly. Their business plan is set by Strategy and Resources Committee, because it's a wider service provider and income earner than the service provided for environment and sustainability. So my committee, we're concerned with the delivery of the recycling waste service. That's part of their work. They do additional work in facility management, additional commercial business waste, and so on. So I can't go into details on that, but that is part of the overall business plan with Strategy and Resources Committee, which you're, if Councillor Dyer wants to comment on that, I'll come back on the other side of the question.
Yeah, as Martin's pointed out, the Bristol Waste is one of our wholly owned companies. So yes, you are right in that their national insurance contributions increase was not covered by national government, and it's a significant increase. I should say as well that also applies to a lot of our partners. For instance, particularly in adult social care providers, a lot of them have been very adversely affected. And I just wanted to comment, you made briefly, you said about their national insurance contributions aren't covered, unlike ours. Our national insurance contributions weren't completely covered. So that was one of the disbenefits from the national settlement, is we found out that we do have to cover about £3.3 million worth of the national insurance contributions. In terms of the Bristol Waste business plan going forward, that obviously is linked into this process, because that would have an impact on their process. So the business planning process, they have been made aware that it's connected to this, that potentially there may be a decision taken in terms of change of frequency. But what we've also written to them here to say, and I'm sure Martin will support this, is that we also need to see a consistent improvement in their collections.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dyer. Do you want to come back in,
Yes,
Councillor Fodor, before I go to other members?
The earlier part of the question you talked about, I think HMOs, and there is no one size fits all. We actually have quite a differentiated service for collecting from different types of household. As you mentioned, there's tower blocks, walk-up flats, flats above shops, homes straight onto the pavement, homes with sort of access issues and so on, with steps and so on. So we already have a range of services. They're carried out in different ways. In fact, I think one thing we hope to see is an additional service for flats above shops to get potentially sacks where they can put out both waste and recycling, and they would get a weekly recycling service, maybe even a weekly waste service if they have nowhere to store wheelie bins, for instance. So we're trying to improve the service overall, and that would all come out of the budget from lowering the cost of the frequency of collections and increasing the amount of recycling and increasing the amount of material that can be marketed from that. So, and we have street areas where storage is provided. And of course, being frank, we know we need to improve the management and maintenance of those where they can attract fly tipping too in the sort of clusters in streets where there are a lot of HMOs or sort of properties that are unsuitable for wheelie bins. So trying to look across the whole spectrum of different types of street and property that we have, but improve the service, I hope.
Councillor Thomas, you had a question?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I mean, I think that what I'm concerned about is that in 9 months' time, we have Bristol Waste saying, oh, you know, we've got difficulties with the standard of service, but we weren't given the right budget. And, you know, with this crossover between Teckle and the council, there's a real danger that things fall between the gaps. And when we were in our private sessions, I felt that the officers were saying that the employer's NI hike is Bristol Waste's problem. It's not Bristol Waste's problem, it's our problem. You know, it's Bristol Waste is operating great value per collection cost compared to other local authorities. That's from my understanding from the last business plan. There is very little slack in the system with Bristol Waste. If we're expecting them to pick up that cost, then we will see a sort of fall in standards of collection. So we have to be confident that Bristol Waste is able to do its job properly. The employer's NI is one element, but also we know from the failed collections in December that it's also got an ageing vehicle fleet. So as a member of this committee, I would want confidence and visibility that Bristol Waste is going to have the budget that it needs. We're not saying it's, you know, because it's Teckle, it's their problem. We shouldn't be doing that, and that they will have the budget to invest in the vehicle fleet that they need, and that needs to be really clear from what is presented to us. At the moment, we can't see that. I'm not saying it won't come, but that's the concern that I'm raising.
Councillor Fodor, do you want to
come? Yeah, thank you. I think you've highlighted something very important. We have to pay for the standard of service we want to get. And us, being frank, the experience from money being taken out of their business plan 2 years ago is that we then stopped getting the service we want to get, and it hasn't been reliable. We've had to put resources back in from what was taken out 2 years ago, and it's taken a long time to repair that damage. We've just recently got back up to you know, very high level of service, but it's had all sorts of ups and downs. In terms of their business plan, that is a sort of wider matter of strategy and resources. Obviously, the opportunity is there for them to earn additional income, but they have to prioritise, as far as I'm concerned, they have to prioritise the service for our residents that my committee wants to see, and our residents expect to see. We're not happy when if our bin or our recycling gets missed, quite rightly. So we need assurances. And having a staged introduction, having a long planning period, having detailed sort of modelling of what's needed, when it's needed, how it's needed, the supply of new containers and things like that are all being looked at very carefully, pending any actual decision by the committee to change the frequency. But yeah, the budget is a separate matter. In the sense that it comes from the business plan, not from our committee.
I have Councillor Hucker and then Logan. Do you want to come back?
I just want to say, I mean, although I might be kind of trying to sound as generous as possible to Bristol Waste, I think there is also very much a role for holding them to account and making sure that management standards are high and you know, doing that week in, week out. So thanks very much.
Certainly. Totally agree with that. And we need our service manager, our client side, to keep a very close look, and we're trying to improve that performance and that oversight. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my comments are similar to those of Councillor Thomas, actually. Bristol Waste currently loses money on its core municipal waste collection service. So the funding that Bristol Waste receives from the council doesn't currently cover the cost of delivering the service. And even if you include the commercial revenue that Bristol Waste earns, then Bristol Waste is still currently loss-making. And the increase in national insurance contributions of 850,000 is an additional pressure. And I don't see that being built into this or taken account of. So if there is a move to, say, 3 weekly collections, I'm pleased that there would be support for larger households and collection of absorbent hygiene products, which I think is absolutely essential. But in terms of the saving that would arise from that, would that be shared between Bristol Waste and Bristol City Council? Bristol Waste, I think, would need an incentive to make the change if they're not going to receive any of the saving from it. So I wondered if that is something that would be shared between the two organisations.
I'm wondering if officers want to comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. It's a very good question. It was certainly not automatically assumed that any savings come straight through to the Council. It's something we're in discussions with the company about, as well as what's the right level of settlement for them in the current context. Obviously, in the context of the settlements we're having to make with all the other parts of the Council's business, which is the business of this committee over the next couple of days.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
So I was going to ask about performance standards. So the key issue is what this presentation, the summary doesn't say, is what's the impact on performance standards. The assumption would be performance standards are maintained and the service is rescheduled, because what wouldn't be acceptable is for the frequency of the collection to reduce and performance standards to reduce further than they are now in terms of compliance with that. Are you confident that that's a risk you're thinking about?
Yeah, that's a very clear point, rightly put. And other things are also in train, for instance, improving the capacity to process cardboard and materials in the Avonmouth sort of depot to reduce the journey times between emptying vehicles. The amount of cardboard being collected has doubled since the pandemic. Shopping habits have changed, there's lots more cardboard, less newspaper, less glass than traditionally there was. So kind of the adjustment has to take account of that, but that does mean there's more to be emptied and processed. So at the same time, we're trying to bring on board new baling capacity in North Bristol, which would shorten journey times for a lot of the city areas, including areas that haven't been well served, such as sort of my own ward recently. So there's a number of things that need to be in place, but yeah, performance monitoring and high standards is very much the goal. Having a more viable service should help that, I hope, financially viable and practical.
Thank you, Councillor Fodor. Is there any closing comments you'd like to make? We can go to the next committee.
Sorry, I didn't follow up because I wanted everyone to get in. I've just got one quick follow-up.
Okay.
Right? So on the question that I asked around what was this model on, you said it was modelled on sort of 3 and 4 week rollout essentially throughout the city. So that's an important point. I wanted just to confirm that. So it was on a sort of a rolling basis of 3 and 4 week collections.
Yeah, the figures that have been looked at are continuing a current 2 weekly service, which has escalating costs, reducing that with 3 weekly and potentially reducing that further with 4. But the most detailed modelling has been of 3 weekly, which is the most likely outcome if the frequency is reduced.
And is that the budget? Is that the figures in the budget we've got?
Most of the figures would come from that, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Blake. Do you want to make any closing remarks? Then I can.
No, I'd like to thank everyone for the question. I think you've raised a whole spectrum of issues that we need to be very open about and coming clean about the performance problems, which we did in my committee in September, and then being open about the fact we're asking people what they have to say. We're going to collect a wide range of views. We know we know there are a whole spectrum of different views, and that we're trying to address things raised by members of the committee when they saw sort of early sort of draft, and we're going to take account of all the responses. So it will come back to committee, to Environment and Sustainability Committee, and there'll be careful consideration of what the results are. But the separate matter of the business planning will have to come to strategy and resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the Environment and Sustainability Budget Options presentation. I just want to say that, look, I'm conscious of the time, and I realise it's really important that we do have these discussions. So I would plead with officers and elected members that are chairs of committees that are here to present, to bear with us while we go through this process. This is all really valuable information that's going to be fed in to the 3rd of February Strategy and Resources meeting, and is going to be the outcome that's going to shape the budget on the 25th of February. So please bear with us. This is not a... I'm responsible for chairing, so it should be on the dot, on the T, but I'm sorry, we're just going to have to look through and get through this. I'm hoping that we can have a break at 3:30 so we can get through children and young people before we go to that break. So if I ask Christine Townsend, Councillor that's responsible for the Children and Young People's Committee Chair, thank you very much. If you can come forward. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So I am the chair of the Children and Young People's Committee. What members might notice is that there is some what would be described financially as investor save, although it's about working with children and families at an earlier stage of need. And so there is a considerable ongoing revenue investment over the next few years around our social work teams in all 3 of our locality areas. It will also enable us to have 1 more social worker to work with post-16 young people who may need support around homelessness, because that is another area where we've seen increased need coming through from our young people. There's a little bit in here about what's going on with the education DSG budget, although largely that is for Forum to be discussing because that's ring-fenced. You will note that there's one area where there's further work to be done around £500,000 for this coming financial year, and then another £500,000 for the financial year after that. And you may also notice that there's some work to be done with our health colleagues around both care packages and SEND independent packages, whereby children are needing health needs met. And when we've done some analysis on that, and I'm sure the officers might be able to expand on this, particularly Fiona around the care side, is that we're not on par with other local authorities. Across a national level, other local authorities have what might be described as a more generous contribution from their health colleagues than we currently do, and that's something that we're looking at kind of behind the scenes, and obviously with our health service colleagues. Yeah, I think that's it. And one of the other, and what I was speaking about yesterday, which was recruitment and status raising, really, about those that choose to foster children that are not biologically theirs, recognising the need for more foster carers locally within our city or within our neighbouring local authorities, because not only is it less financially costly, the outcomes are better for children. This is arguably one of the areas where the less you spend, the better the service and the better the outcomes for children. So if you're in a position where you're helping children and families at an earlier stage of whatever that need is, and you're able to better meet it at that point, you reduce escalation. And so it's almost like you don't see it, and that's kind of the perfect service, really. Is there anything, Fiona or Vic, you want to add to this? So questions on what's proposed?
So I'd like to open for members of the finance subgroup to ask questions, children and young people's chair that's present here today. So didn't see who first. Okay, Councillor McAllister, and then Councillor Hucker, and Councillor Logan. That's the order we'll go. Okay, so Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for Christine for that presentation. I've got a couple of interlinked questions just about how feasible some of these proposed savings are. So I know that this came up in the finance, in the confidential briefings we had a couple of months ago. The identified savings in the children and education budget, where we're aiming to save £1 million over 2 years from the overall budget just by reviewing things. That seems quite optimistic given that these budgets have been under pressure for a long time. Like how many more easy wins are there within that budget? Likewise, children's health to be funded by the right organisations, £750,000 proposed saving just from clarifying our rules and having better processes in place. These seem quite optimistic, and if we can do them, great, but how realistic do you actually think they are?
Okay, so I'll take the second one first. If we need to, we will go to court and judicially review. And the one, I mean, Fiona may well come in and add more to that, but that's the bottom line, because we're such an outlier. Around the additional £500,000 next year and the year after that, it's education and children each year. These areas will be looked at. The number of schools that the authority is responsible for will reduce because we've got more and more schools becoming academised. So that has an impact, but we're yet basically, bottom line, we're yet to identify that unless the work has been done in the last couple of days that I'm not aware of, and there has been areas that have been identified.
Thank you. And then just to follow up from that's reassuring. Back of the envelope, I just did back of the envelope, and it looks like we're looking at about a 23% cut to the overall children and education budget, if I've got my numbers right, over the next 5 years. Is that sustainable for the service, or have I got my numbers wrong?
I'd have to do the maths to get 23% as well. The saving is about preventing escalation of need, both for children, but also for families and then communities at a wider level. That's what it's about, because the high costs that we've seen over the last few years is because families and children have been left, so their needs have escalated. The pandemic has added to that, but if we are working with families and children at a younger age, closer to when the need emerges, is about prevention.
Thanks, that's reassuring, because after all, that's better for the families and the children as well as the council.
Yeah, better outcomes for everybody, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Christine. Councillor McAllister has actually already asked my question, so yeah.
Councillor Logan.
I have 3 questions, and Councillor McAllister has asked one of them. So that £1 million balancing figure, we need to have more detail before we can approve the final budget. That is the value of that is the same as the value we've just been talking about with bin collections. We can't agree that without more detail. But
I agree.
So my 2 questions remaining are on optimism and on children's homes. So on optimism in generally, the Family First strategy is exactly the right one. That is the approach that I think all councillors support, and we are doing the right things to achieve that change, and it is the right outcomes for children. But the savings identified are a huge amount of money. So the question is just, if we get that 20% wrong, we're still broke. So I don't know how much confidence we have in the level, the impact of those changes within the timescale that we've set, because the impact on year 1 is quite a lot of money. So I think we're concerned about whether that will actually happen within that timescale. Irrespective, it's the right thing to do. The second question is about children's homes and new children's homes, because one of the best thing the council is doing at the moment is building some children's homes. So I think we're increasing our bed space, I think from 14 to 32, something like that. And that means we will have the capacity in Bristol to not put young people in placements far away from Bristol at an expensive provider that we don't have control over. So that is a fantastic thing to be doing, but we don't seem to be doing it over the period. I think that plan is, I think, for year 1 and year 2, and then there aren't any more, which implies we've only got the plan for the buildings we currently know about, but it implies that we haven't got a plan to have a programme to do that, backed by the capital programme over the next 5 years. And I really think that is a missed opportunity. I think we need more of that, because those are the solutions where Bristol can solve its own problems. So my question is, should there be more of that within this timescale?
I'm not saying no to that, but what I am saying is putting children in children's home is not as good as putting them in with foster families. Okay, so that's why the focus is on foster families for children, whereby it is deemed necessary both by our professional social work teams and then the courts for that child to be removed from their biological family. The point of early intervention is so that we don't get to that point. That's the idea. And so these numbers have been worked up looking at current costs with current practice and current numbers. We're putting in the investment of the social work teams within the family hubs in localities in order to do that prevention work. If it doesn't work, partly it will be because the needs of children are so great and it wasn't predicted to have escalated at that rate. We are still coming out of the pandemic. We're still not fully understanding the impact that that's had on families and particularly children as they're growing. And we are seeing escalating need at teenage and adolescent years. I think that will continue for a good few more years coming through the system. And as those adolescents go into early adulthood, we don't know what impact it will have on them. We have the investment going in that I was able to negotiate out of the budget that we know is coming down from central government. We can't spend money that we aren't being given on children's social care from national government. That is not something that we're able to do, unfortunately. We welcome that we have had a little bit more from the 250 million that was announced. Whether it's enough remains to be seen. But we are recruiting social workers. We're about to go out to start doing some of this recruitment, to start recruiting some of these family workers. There has been pilot schemes that have run, particularly within drug and alcohol support, that are shown to be successful. There is confidence underneath, but I can't put my hand on my heart and say the needs of our growing children right now at the moment in our city is going to outstrip our predictions over the next 3 or 4 years. I can't say that, and I don't think anyone can, to be honest.
I mean, thank you for that answer. That describes the process that we're setting out. I guess the point we're saying is we could be using the capital programme more to invest in local placements if we thought that supported the strategy. So it's something that would be within our control. I'm getting the capital programme out the door as quickly as the systems within this council allows us to do that. We were behind in May, both with the capital programmes for send places and in this area. So it's been accelerated since May. So I think that's the first point that I would make. There will be more capital investment. If we need children's homes, I think it's going to be more likely to be older children that may be coming into the system and presenting. They're not necessarily children that are growing up in our city. They might be children that are presenting into our city that may well need our support under our obligations as a council. We think we've got the numbers right. We think the capital programme for the next few years is where it needs to be and is feasible in terms of actually getting them built and getting the delivery partners together and or recruiting the staff that are needed in order and going through the offset process with children's homes. It's quite a long, I'm sure you can imagine, it's quite a long process on top of planning and getting it actually physically built. There's a long, it's called process whereby you get registered with the children's home and you have to recruit very specialist and highly skilled staff.
we think we're at the point where we're getting what we can in that time scale. I mean, that's what I can... I mean, Fiona or Vic, do you want to add to that? I mean, have you got something for yourself, Fiona, really?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the ambitious programme that you've kind of referred to, I would just say that we will be ready to go. As Councillor Towns said, we are already have that model in place, already recruiting. So 1st of April, we're going, and the service feels positive, motivated about it. We have investment in us. We are already kind of cognizant of that and the work that we need to take on, but there's a real clear motivation across the directorate about now achieving and delivering on that work, because as we said, that's best for our children as well as for the budget. So I'm confident that we're going to work really hard to achieve that over the year. In terms of the children's homes, we have done some analysis about the numbers of children who are in our out of authority expensive placements who could be cared for within Bristol. It's a certain number of children with particularly complex needs, and we've kind of worked through, I suppose, the tipping point about what number is the right number to think about creating in Bristol, which we now have. We'll keep that under review, but at the moment we think that is the right number that we're heading for.
I have Councillor Brown, Blake, and then Thomas. So, Councillor Brown.
Thanks. I think we all had the same question about that, those generic unidentified savings, and I know I've raised that elsewhere. I wanted to come back on your reply to Councillor McAllister just to make sure I understand it, because Councillor McAllister had referred to a figure of 23%, but I took out of your reply that the savings identified here are not necessarily savings on the existing budget. Some of them will be nominal savings based on the anticipated budget that had already been, previously approved in previous years within the council. Is that right? Or have I just confused matters further?
The savings are around... It's not about saving money, it's about not spending it, because you capture the needs earlier with either the children or the families.
Yeah, so thank you.
I think cost avoidance, is that what they call it in finance terms? I think they call it that. Yeah.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Christine. I think I have 3 points. I've just add my voice to the £1 million. And I'm glad you committed to giving more information. I think that's really important. Second point about NHS funding, I totally agree that we're an outlier, but I think that the bottom line of essentially taking the NHS to court, as you said, would be a lengthy process and a costly one at that as well. And I just think that we need to avoid that by every means possible, I would say. I mean, the NHS... it's probably gone up from my last figures, but I thought it was 30 million oversubscribed, the ICB. I think it's probably bigger now. So they'll be arguing as strongly on their side that not to contribute in this space. And I think it also applies to adult social care as well. So I'm with you on the argument. I just don't know how we're going to get that saving in the next financial year. I think it's probably going to come, if it will come, in future years. And I think that there's a high degree, I would suggest a high degree of risk associated with that figure. And then the final point was all these initiatives that you're proposing are generally good ones, but they're really hard to do, massively hard to do. And it's great to hear officers saying they're motivated to get on and deliver it. I just wondered, I mean, when I look at the budget savings that we look at throughout all the various policy committees, this one I think is probably one of the hardest budgetary changes to make, and I just wondered what officers' view were around the risks associated with these figures and achieving them.
We've got SEND and care, so officers can give their view on the risks. What I would say about the health is that individual packages, as you know, are hugely costly, and children's packages are more costly than an adult package will be. I disagree with you. I don't think this is a huge amount on that basis.
Yeah, I can answer in terms, we've already started the conversations with our health colleagues around this and about having kind of reviewing the process and having robust processes and transparency in place. So those conversations already happened before this.
And how about the sort of overall risk associated with the overall savings programme, given that just it's only my assessment, but this is some of the hardest stuff to do.
I mean, I suppose the main risk is unknown need that will appear at our front door, and that's nothing. There is very little we can do about that if it's not something that's already within and being monitored within the population of the city. This is based on what we know now and what trends have shown us might happen. What happens 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line. If there's a very traumatic event, either locally or at a national level, that has a huge impact on families.
Can I just, I mean, I'm not, just to clarify, I'm assuming that obviously those things could blow you off course, right? Absolutely. I'm assuming that none of that happens, that you just have this programme to deliver. If you just have this programme to deliver, I still think that it's on the higher risk in terms of be able to deliver it all in the timescales you've associated with it. And that's it. So I understand about having a fair wind behind you. Other stuff can scupper it. I'm just thinking your assessment about delivering all this now, is it completely low risk, or do you think it's medium risk, or is it high risk?
Some of it is higher than others, obviously. Some of it's already started. I think the employment stuff is quite low risk. That's one of the better services within this area. I think they've got a very good foundation to start doing that. The stuff with the schools block is neither here nor there, actually. It's kind of, Tonight Forum will agree with that. I suppose there might be a risk around the new recruitment of very highly skilled workers. So there's a possibility that there might be a bit of slippage on that, although that has started. And Bristol is generally considered to be quite a good employer, and it is the recruitment of those that are family practitioners is not as acute as recruitment into sort of social work scales. But you're welcome, Kelvin. So come to the CYP committees, as we will be monitoring this.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it will be out in the public domain as to how this kind of moves ahead.
I have Councillor Thomas next, and then Councillor Dyer wants to come in. So, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I mean, lots of good proposals here. I mean, just in terms of context, £1 million is fairly loose change in terms of what's been happening in children and family services. The overspend this year is £25 million. Yeah, so that's 25 times what we might be looking to save on libraries. So, you know, I would just be relieved if we stop having constant budget overruns, and actually how we get the financial controls and the management controls so that we can set a budget and we don't have a 25% overspend. That's what I think will be really good if we can do that. And I really disagree about the NHS. I think we should be treated at least as fairly as other local authorities are. So personally, I would encourage you to go and negotiate hard, and I think we should be doing the same on the adult social care NHS area as well. And I just wonder what scope you think there might be for squeezing some of these private sector providers who are making a lot of money out of us at the moment.
I mean, part of the point of this is so that we're not in a position where that's the only option that we have.
Yeah.
There is a supply and demand issue across the kind of children's services estate, particularly when it comes to residential high needs kind of accommodation and support for children. And part of that is about building our own children's homes and having that service and providing it kind of in-house, trying to prevent and escalate the needs. In the end, though, if you're on a Friday afternoon and you're a social worker and you've got a child that needs somewhere to stay that night, you've got to get somewhere for that child to stay that night that is going to be safe. And that's the bottom line. And that is where these overspends have come from. I agree with you. I think if we can we're now at the point where there's some stability. I feel we still need at least a couple more kind of quarters where we can see the stability has been maintained. I'm not confident that it's not going to go back up again, if you know what I mean. But it's the first time we've seen it since I've been in since May, that it's got to that point. We're still overspending, and we still need to monitor and track and keep a really tight grip on what's going on. But that's where we are at this moment.
Thank you. And I think even, with the level of price gouging that might be taking place, I think we should be also, even though we recognise there's imbalance between supply and demand in the marketplace, I think some naming and shaming around private sector providers who are making an awful lot of money out of this could be quite helpful in negotiations as well.
Yeah, that they are looking to try to have better frameworks and better engage those providers, but providers they're not required to fit into local authority frameworks. The same is true of independent special schools. There's no requirement because they're a business, and businesses are treated in the way are subject to those regulations, and there's not requirements put in place on those service providers to engage with local authorities in that way. Maybe that will change.
Thank you. Councillor Dye, and then Councillor McAllister wants to make a point.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments, overall comments. All of these proposals have an element of risk. What we're looking at is trying to make the best possible calculation at this particular moment in time. What I'm more confident about is that because we have put in the various controls and management processes, that these decisions should have a much better chance that when we get to the end of the budget year, the end of the financial year, that we would have delivered a much higher proportion of what was in the budget. What we've had in the past, to be honest, has been a very low level of delivery of savings, 65, 67, 70%. We need to be up in the 90, 95% if we're a competent council. But everything has its risks. In particular, with things like children's services, children's social care, adult social care, we know there are environmental pressures to do with the cost of living crisis and other factors that is driving up demand. That's driving that demand up at a higher rate than the increase in spending power we've been provided with. So we're aware of that, and that's what we have to work with, which is why we're very clear about making sure we monitor on a regular basis whatever the budget is that we put forward to make sure that we keep in line. This council is not going to go to war with the NHS. This is not about having a fight. This is about getting a fair settlement for both sides. The NHS is also grossly underfunded and under great pressure. What we want to do is work with the NHS locally and nationally to make sure we get a deal that is fair for both of us, because it's no good either of us getting into a situation where we're trying to take advantage of each other. But the reality is we have a situation at the moment that is fundamentally unfair. We need to find a way to rebalance that. And then the third thing I'll say is one of the major themes of the new government coming in is to look at public sector reform. They are aware, in the same way that Christine is very much aware within her area and others, of the need to reform our public services work. They are not working effectively in a number of areas. as a member of the core cities, we have published a report called about preventative public services. That has gone to central government, has been very well received. So a lot of what Christine is proposing should receive a lot of support at national level as well, and from other authorities who themselves are starting to look at doing similar things.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very conscious of time, so apologies, but I did want to follow up on something that the exchange that Councillor Townsend and Councillor Councillor Thomas were having. Excuse me. Obviously, there's a demand and supply imbalance in the market, but presumably, and this is a genuine question, is Bristol City Council not the main and the dominant buyer of these placements in the children's social care marketplace in Bristol?
In Bristol, yes, but we've got children that are placed, they're literally placed all over the country.
I understand that, but within Bristol, we've got, I think the economic term is monopsony power, like we're the only buyer, so can we not use that to kind of try and leverage the market within Bristol as well?
Well, we're not the only buyer because we buy all over the country and authorities all over the country buy all over the country. The system is so tight that the one place that that child needs at that time might be in Sunderland, and it's going to cost what it's going to cost, because the whoever that supplier is in Sunderland know that as an authority you literally have no choice, because that's the position that you're in, and that's the legal responsibility that you have as the corporate parent at that time for that child. Fiona, would you? Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to come to Councillor Mack and then closing comments from Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, I'm actually going to talk from, I was on corporate parenting for a long time, so I'm interested in that. So I'm actually going to add a bit more, which isn't quite my role here. But one thing is profit-making companies don't particularly want to set up children's homes in Bristol because it's a very expensive place to be. So it's not like there's a massive, as I understand, a massive market within Bristol. Which is one key thing. And another point, actually, I'd just like to make is Wales have pledged to remove profit-making from their children's services, which, you know, we are currently massively overspending on a budget that is largely going to profit-making companies, and I personally, on such a vital service, think that that's immoral, and that would be a government-led change, but something that I certainly, you know, it might take years to happen in Wales, but I would love to see in the UK too, because it's not working as it is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend, do you want to make any closing remarks, and then we can go to a break?
I think my closing remarks, I mean, I accept that there's still some work to do here for the 2 years of the £500,000 around some budget. That is actual savings as opposed to costs not incurred. I do want to say that there is invest save revenue going into children's social care, and that is as a result of the recognition of the seriousness of the situation that children's social care is in and the impact that it has on children and actual people's lives. I accept that when bins aren't picked up, it's really annoying, but children's social care is where children actually get the opportunities that impact on how their lives will turn out as they move into adulthood, and through adulthood. Sometimes I'm disappointed at the lack of interest in children's social care and education across the board from elected members, and I'm not pointing anybody out that happens to be in this room at the moment. It's a huge part of our budget. Alongside with the DSG, it's the biggest single area of revenue on an annual basis that this council will see. And there's reasons for that, and it's about the importance and the statutory duties that are retained within children's services and education. And I think I stood up and I was making quite passionate pleas last night about all of us taking our corporate parenting responsibilities and having that at the front of our minds a bit more maybe when we're doing our other pieces of work, and always keeping the needs of our most disadvantaged and vulnerable children and their families at the forefront of every other single sort of conversation and area that we're thinking about as a council, and that will only improve how it is that we're able to make the lives of of Bristol's children as best as they can be. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. So I think we should take a comfort break now for about 10 minutes, not more than that. And then we'll return 5 to 4. We have 3 areas to cover, and we have 1 hour and 5 minutes from when we come back. So I think we should be okay. I can see that Stephen hasn't come back yet, and he's next. Yeah, looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah. So that it can inform the council leader who chairs the Strategy and Resources Committee for the 25th of February's budget meeting. So if I can go to, so we're going to do a little bit of an alteration in the agenda. We're going to go to economy and skills with Councillor Brown, Andrew Brown presenting. You ready, Councillor Brown? Thank you. So I'm hoping IT is going to support that.
Okay. So there's just two items within the papers relating to Economy and Skills Committee, one of which has already been subject to a decision by the committee, so officers are proceeding with, and that's the digital advertising concession. So the council has 17 double-sided screens around Broadmead, 34 screens in total, that are operated by on our behalf. That contract has been underperforming due to damage to the screens and the fact that it's in an extension period, meaning that the operators haven't been replacing those. So we are going out to procure a new contract to replace those screens and to increase the level of income. It's anticipated increase in the level of income to the council as a subject of that procurement exercise, and the officers are working on that procurement as we speak. I know that the advertising screens have a level of controversy around them. It is hoped that the new contract will also allow for greater use in terms of public messaging on behalf of the council and other organisations. With regards to St Nicholas Market, we've had a decision made at committee to consult on moving to a percentage of turnover model for traders within the glass market, food traders within the St Nick's Market. So we're going out to consultation to look at different models of applying that. We are looking at a 5% increase in fees from April, and then there will be a subsequent paper come back to committee for a decision on how we move forward with regards to fees across the rest of the market, whether we move to a percentage-based approach across the whole market or just within the glass arcade. Again, we've looked at practice elsewhere. And this is an approach that's been adopted in other cities to some success. So that is something, but as I say, that's subject to consultation, and that consultation will be going live shortly. Both of these measures, the savings are fully delivered, or the potential savings would be fully delivered in 26, 27. There will be some element in 25, 26 as well, but that's not, that's not banked as such, because of timeframes.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Anybody like to make any comments or ask any questions, any observations? Councillor McAllister and then Councillor Logan.
Well, I'm happy to not go first for once, but I don't mind. Thank you for this. Didn't really know what I was doing there. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Not really a question on either of these two proposals, which I think both look quite straightforward, to be honest. And I don't. But more generally, I suppose, much as I'm grateful to have less reading to do for this particular item, because I was wondering why there were only two proposals in comparison to the other policy areas, and if that's just a function of the work your policy committee does, or if there just officers weren't able to identify any other saving options. Thanks.
It's a function of the fact that the revenue spend within the economy and skills remit is it's very limited. So yeah, so it's a function of what's within the remit of the committee. There's more strategic and and capital projects, but not necessarily a huge scope for savings or increasing income on a revenue basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Logan?
I just want to know what the assessment of the impact will be on St Nick's. How do you think these changes will affect the market?
So part of the approach and part of the reason why there is a potential differentiation between the covered market and the Corn Exchange and the Glass Arcade or the food traders is to recognise that turnover model, those different parts of the market have different business models and different margin levels. And the experience elsewhere has been that food traders can, the sort of percentage model works better with food traders than it would do with traditional market goods. The hope is that it will help generate innovation within the market and help increase the variety and diversity of offering within the market and therefore increase footfall to the other parts. So there is so that's part of the sort of thinking that's gone into it. There is that is outlined to some extent in the public report that was published for Economy and Skills Policy Committee in December, I think. So I'll happily forward that on to you if you want more information, because there is the officer's paper, but also the work done by the independent consultants that outlines it in much more detail, which I can share.
Councillor Brown, can I just ask one question with regards to the energy consumption on these LEDs? They're probably LED screens. Has there been any work on what that is and whether they are seen to be more energy efficient if we're going to take out a new contract?
I might have to defer to officers on this one. Because from memory, I can't remember. I believe the intention is to try and get that the procurement paper will cover that and look to have something that's more efficient than the current screens, but I'm going to maybe throw over to Alex for more up-to-date detail.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, the answer is that we'll test that through procurement. I think technology has been improving in this respect anyway, but we will be testing that through the procurement exercise.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I just wanted to just come in because I think Councillor Brown is perhaps undersold the importance of the committee chairs. He's absolutely right that there isn't a massive amount of revenue spend within his committee, but his committee does cover some three major areas, which I just wanted to highlight. Which one is we are currently producing an economic strategy for the city going forward. Economy and Skills will be responsible for that strategy and are working on it already. Also, the skills agenda will have a much higher increase going forward, and it's vitally important. And at the same time as we're looking at our budget here, we also have the West of England Combined Authority looking at their budget, and there will be a significant amount of spend on skills within that budget as well. And then finally, with the changes of a new government coming in with different housing targets, obviously we have the local plan, which has currently gone to the planning inspector. Once that local plan is approved and adopted, we'll almost immediately have to start work on the next adopted plan because of our housing numbers in that local plan being considerably lower than the housing numbers that are coming from government.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer. Is there any more questions or comments? No? If not, then Councillor Brown, do you want to sum up, and then we can go to the next policy?
My only summing up is to blush at Councillor Dyer's comments. But yeah, because even though there's only 2 savings identified in these papers, it's not because I've been idle.
Thank you very much. If we can now come to the item that we skipped because we couldn't find Stephen. Public health and communities. Okay. Public health and communities, Councillor Stephen Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to give virtually everything over to questions. I'm sure you've got plenty, but just like Christine was saying earlier, that people perhaps don't appreciate the impact of her budget. Everyone knows the magnitude of it, but doesn't appreciate maybe where it's spent. With my committee, people might not appreciate just how much we spend because our gross call on the general fund, which I know is primarily what you're interested in as part of the budget, is only 14.7 million, but our gross budget is actually 96 million. But we have a lot of income and grants coming in to finance much of what we do. So our net call on the general fund is much lower. And the sheer breadth of what we do is quite staggering. And although I've now been in this position for 7 months, I am still discovering every week something that my committee, and therefore I primarily, am responsible for. And just to give you a flavour of them, Chair, it's everything from environmental health. Every time you see a food rating on one of your businesses, perhaps, it's done by our officers, domestic abuse, sexual violence, everything to do with safer cities, community cohesion, all of the festivals and events that we have in the city, libraries, which I'm guessing we're going to come to, the 26 of them, animal welfare, tackling tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs, sexual health, leisure, play. We have lots of play parks, over 100 parks, cemeteries, which has been a hot topic on the community in the past as well, and trading standards. And I've left out quite a few things. So the sheer breadth of public health and communities, the communities is quite nebulous really, but it covers an awful lot of things which every single citizen in the city probably experiences every week. We spent a lot of time earlier on bins, because that's a universal service that every household knows that they get, but an awful lot of what I've just read out probably impacts on most households and families right across the city. In the savings from that 14.7 million call on the general fund, you've seen the slides the last time I came before you. On libraries, it's a range, and that's because there are options that officers and I and other members have discussed that range from where we are, so saving nothing, to quite a huge cut of £2 million. And then some rather more modest savings in allotments, parks of £129,000. Most of that is reclassifying some of our country estates as country parks, so we can recover the VAT on car parking, for instance. But I've just given you a flavour, Chair, so I'm happy to take your questions, and I've got several officers who might bail me out if I need it.
So I'm waiting for indications from members. Councillor. Councillor Mack?
I just thought McAllister should have to wait in line once I dived in there. Could you let us know what it would look like, what the process would be like if an agreement for savings in the library service goes ahead?
Sorry. Well, there are a range, as you saw on the slide last time, of library savings, which range from doing nothing, so keeping all the central library and the 25 branch libraries we have across the city, through to the options that are worked up. Option 5, which I think is in the slide that you saw previously, is a saving of £812,000. But that alone is still a 17% reduction in the gross budget that this committee, my committee, is responsible for. I should have said at the outset, it's roughly £5 million that Public Health and Communities are responsible for the delivery of the library service. That's primarily the staff in our libraries, but it's also the book fund. Some of the other costs are actually borne by the leaders, Strategy and Resources Committee, so the property utility costs. Most of our buildings are owned, but there are a few that are leased, so there are rental costs, which vary quite a bit. Knoll Library, for instance, costs us, I think, £47,000 a year. So it depends what option we go for. I guess Councillor Mack, as we were informal on this committee, I indicated last time the saving that is in the budget proposals, the £42 million savings in development that have been looked at across the council, is the starkest. It's the £2 million saving, which would involve us roughly retaining somewhere in between 7 and 10 libraries plus the central library. I have indicated all the way throughout this process that is not something that I personally favour, and I didn't think I'd be able to bring the committee with me in endorsing a saving of that magnitude. It was too big, and therefore it hasn't been supported. What I do recognise is that we can't make over £40 million worth of savings without the library service making some contribution. It's not true, as some people say, that it is a discretionary service and we don't have to do it. The 1964 Libraries Act says we need a comprehensive and efficient library service. So depends how you define comprehensive, but it is not true to say if we just kept the central library, for instance, we'd be complying with legislation, let alone what our citizens expect. So happy to take other questions, I'm sure, on libraries, but my strong steer to you, if I'm allowed to do that, Chair, is to go for one of the lower budgetary savings, which will give us a nudge to reform the service, because that is what I'm primarily focused on. While we do have 26 buildings across the city that have the word library over the door, we do not have a comprehensive service. On any given day, quite a lot of those libraries are closed. Today's a Wednesday, so 5 are closed. Tomorrow's Thursday, 9 will be closed all day long. Even for the ones that are open, they're only open sometimes for 3 or 4 hours a day, often in the middle of the day. So if you're a worker, Bristol is the most prosperous city in the country. We have the very highest public employment rate of any of the core cities that Tony referred to earlier. The library isn't open for you. So our service, while in theory we've got a good network, the service offer is actually poor, if we're honest. So I want a budgetary nudge which will oblige the committee to reform that service and make it fit for purpose going forward.
So I have Councillor McAllister next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to stay on the libraries for now, I recall when we had our private briefing on this, there was a general view floating around that it's probably, we're in a situation, we would all, I'm sure, like all the libraries to be open all of the time, but we're in a situation now where some of them, as you mentioned, are not operating an efficient service. They're open for a few hours a week, potentially. It does seem like consolidation, so we've got reliable opening hours at maybe fewer locations, but which are operating a more consistent service is maybe better than where we are now, where we've got a bit of a zombie service in some areas of the city. I don't think anyone here enjoys having this conversation at all. But is that sort of where you're indicating you'd like for efforts to go? Just from my understanding.
Yes, Chair, that's a pretty good summary of where I think we're at. I'm not sure I'd call it a zombie service, but different generation to me. But
with no disrespect to the
we
staff,
all know what you mean.
obviously.
It's certainly a shadowy service in large parts of the city. Your ward, Councillor McAllister's ward, has the best library service in the city because you've got the central library, and the communities around the central library have a pretty good service. The more you move away from that, the service is pretty poor. What is also clear, because I've been looking at a lot of data and thinking about this for months, is that usage of our libraries has enormous variations across the city, some of which you can explain, some of which are actually quite difficult to explain. Avonmouth Library has about 3,000 visitors a year. Henley's Library and Bishopson Library on the Gloucester Road are about 70,000 visits a year, an absolutely massive difference. So there are lots of issues that we need to look at. But first of all, we need to think about what sort of library service do we want. I would like, whatever the network is, for it to be open for when people find it convenient to go to the library. So that will require, I think, some more evening opens or early evening openings at some of the branch libraries, as well as the central library, and what people want from the library. And can we deliver other council services from this network of buildings as well? Because what we've got at the moment, which you should be concerned about, and Stratchy Resources should be concerned about, is a huge physical asset that is actually in the dark for a huge amount of the week. So we're very wastefully using a big resource at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, referring back, I'm conscious we're referring to something that we've seen in the informal briefings of this committee that aren't in the papers for today, but I just also want to add my voice to those pushing back against the top line options that were presented to us, because I do not think those will fly. They won't fly with me for a start. I just want to just get context on the. I think you kind of touched on this already, but context on the scale of the library budget, and also sort of the history of the library budget going back, because we, having been a councillor in the past term, we lived through a period when there was extended recruitment freeze, and that was impacting on the service across the city, and we had daily emails with several libraries having to shut every day due to staff shortages. But more broadly, where has the budget been, and where has the budget come from in terms of the library service as a whole to where it is now, to where we might end up?
I may need some assistance from Kate, who is here in a second, about the absolute figures that it would have been in the past. But as I understand it, during the last administration, at least a quarter of the library's budget was taken out. So while the library buildings network wasn't touched, the opening hours of those buildings were reduced dramatically. And as Councillor Brown has just referred to, there was also a recruitment freeze operating, I think, for a couple of years, which meant that even those reduced hours could not be offered on a predictable basis. And I certainly remember after May, when all of us were elected or re-elected, we were getting those daily emails and the Twitter postings that X library was meant to be open today, but is not open. It's closed because a staff member was sick, and there was no flexibility within the remaining pool of staff to deploy someone else to keep it open. We got rid of that freeze operationally as soon as possible, and Kate has recruited almost to full staffing complement at the moment. I think we've got 2 vacancies when I last heard from Kate, which is sort of normal operational levels from about 100 full-time equivalent staff. But libraries have been cut severely, to answer Councillor Brown's question, in the past, and I think we now have to be honest about the fact that cutting the hours that the service is open but keeping the bricks and mortar is not a good service and is political trickery, which I don't want to do going forward. But Kate can probably say what the budget was, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
Thank you. Just to deal with recruitment, yes, we are almost fully staffed, so that's very good news. For the past 2 financial years, we have had a recruitment freeze, and we've contributed towards council savings, almost £500,000 each year. Previously, we had to find significant savings in the, I think it was 2016, which led to a reduction of the opening hours in the library service across all libraries by 25%. So we have experienced some year-on-year reductions in both the materials fund, some staffing posts, and some supplies and services that we obviously use to support the delivery of the entire service. Our budget is currently 4.9 million. That includes the current pay award. And we are no longer under a recruitment freeze, so we are operating as normal in this financial year, obviously until we reach a conclusion of these discussions.
Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Stephen. I'd like to endorse the comments that Councillor Kent made during public forum. I think that if we were operating a system of priority-based budgeting, then I personally would assign a very high score to maintaining the library service, maintaining the existing coverage. If closures are considered, and I hope they're not, but if they are, then what criteria would be applied to deciding which branches would be at risk?
Thank you, Councillor Huck. I mean, your library is actually quite a good example of what I was talking about. It has been open today, but you've already missed your chance to go to it because it closed at 2 o'clock. And that's what, I don't know whether your constituents, your residents, find that a satisfactory service or not. What I didn't mention at the start, Chair, was comparing Bristol's with our other core cities. Now, the one that's closest to us in population is Liverpool. Liverpool, at the time that this table was drawn up a few months ago, had 16 libraries across the city with a very similar population to us. We've got 26. Other core cities have fewer. And per head, Bristol has the most generous library network of any city. And I'm saying network deliberately because it's a measurement of bricks and mortar, not opening times. I believe some of our other core cities are proposing to reduce these numbers even more from the conversations I've had with some of my counterparts elsewhere. So other core cities have been further down this path than us before, and because of the budgetary pressure that they've all been under successive governments for a long period of time, and have clearly come to a point where they're offering a service that is predictable and realistic and comprehensive and efficient under the Act, where people can at least access a library on a reliable basis. And that's where I'd like to get to for our city. I think we could get to a point where the service offer in terms of hours open is not that different to what we have at the moment, but could well be delivered from fewer buildings. But the point is, it will be a better service for the public. And you asked about criteria. All sorts of criteria will have to be taken into account, including statutory criteria from DCMS that will have to operate under. The way I'm currently envisaging that we will go forward, once we know what our budgetary envelope is that the committee will commission a task and finish group, which, as I understand it, Chair, can be drawn from elsewhere in the Council, not just solely from the membership of Public Health and Communities, to set some of the criteria. That'll be quite a quick task. And then the committee itself will have a working group to work through everything about what we want the library service to look at, and undoubtedly the difficult decisions we might have to make about where physically that network might be. But one of the factors we'll take into account is the investment that has been made in the past in extended access, because there are 3 libraries and Stockwood is one of them, where at the moment you can go in even when it's notionally closed in terms of no staff, and as long as you've registered and have the right card and so on, you can self-check in and check out, as it were. Westbury-on-Trim in my ward also and St George are the other 2 that have that. So there are issues like that we would want to look at as well. Maybe we can have that model at more libraries in the future. Transport links would be another.
Councillor McAllister, you want to come back in?
Thank you. I actually have a question about a point not related to libraries. So if anyone else wants to talk about libraries, I'm happy to wait until they've gone.
Councillor Blake, did you want to talk about libraries?
I do want to talk about libraries. So I just, I get where you're coming from, but I really worry about the outcome. And once bricks and mortar's gone, it's gone. And you won't be bringing back libraries in the future, potentially in communities that we've removed them from. So hence why I think, even though we've kept the buildings and a reduced service, it's one of those ones that says if we're in a better position in the future, we could then start to extend hours and provide more services out of them. And I think that was the primarily reason around trying to keep that sort of community asset, essentially. And often now libraries are not used for traditional library services. I mean, the one in Hillfields, for instance, which is probably the one's at risk because of the numbers, it's a massive community asset. It provides a lot of services at the particular times they're open. So I think, I don't know how that, hopefully that could be assessed in this task and finish group. I do worry about, I guess you were assuming that, Stephen, in the sense that the saving is just $750,000 in the next financial year and then bigger in the year after. So that's assuming the £2 million. And I know you've said you wouldn't want to go to that level, but getting savings in the next financial year after we've started the task and finish group is going to be pretty hard going, I must say. And there'll be big campaigns for some of these libraries, and hard fought as well by councillors. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago where the proposal was a 3% cut out of the budget, and lots of opposition groups at the time were against it. I think there was a quote by Barry saying that it was an outrageous gutting of the service. So I think there's more to go. I accept that. But I think that we need to think very seriously about these cuts to the bricks and mortar, because once we've cut it and once they're closed, they're not coming back. And I think that's the thing for me we need to be aware of. I certainly wouldn't support that. I'd have to have much more justification, I think, to understand why we're going down that road.
Chair, I don't really disagree with anything Calvin has, Councillor Blake has said. Hillfields Library, it's open today for 5 hours, but it's closed Monday, Thursday, Friday, and like all other branch libraries, it's closed on Sundays. It's a pretty poor service to the residents of Hillfields on the days it is open. It's only open from 10 till 5. Those are the issues that we need to look at. Are we wedded to the theoretical physical network, or are we committed to delivering a quality service? And I don't think there is ever a good time to do it, and that's undoubtedly why the previous administration knew the political heat that was going to be incoming if any particular library was totally closed. But these are closures by stealth. Let's be blunt about it. This was a stealth closure program over several years of squeezing the number of hours and days that libraries were open, when in reality, what the service that the public got was slashed quite dramatically. I think there is an opportunity for us here to reform the service, do it once and do it well. And I know that's what the service itself would like to do. They think change is likely to come, but they want us to do it once and do it well, because all of Kate's staff are professionally committed to delivering an exemplary service to the public. But where we are at the moment could not be described in that way.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I have Councillor McAllister and two new. Yeah, and I'm conscious of the time as well. So, Councillor McAllister, and then we'll come to.
Well, if the new hands are about libraries, again, I'm happy to wait, just because we're having it's a good flow of conversation right now.
So, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my comments are twofold. I mean, one is that there was a kind of very good review conducted a few years ago. So, and I think the criteria in that were good. And I think just kind of picking that back up to make sure that we are, rather than reinventing the wheel would be really helpful. And the other thing, Stephen, I mean, I kind of didn't really hear you mention, I mean, you're talking about running a service, but, certainly in Clifton and in lots of other places, these are community centres and have meeting rooms. So, making sure that we're looking at their function as community centres as well as places that you kind of get books and CDs and videos from. So, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I entirely endorse that. These are, in many cases, not just library services are delivered from them, but that's something we need to get a comprehensive understanding of. And either the Task and Finish group or the working group that follows it will obviously build up that picture. And as you say, this has been looked at in the past, so we'll make use of the sort of residual memory that's there. But because the hours have been reduced substantially over the last few years, maybe since that last in-depth study was done, fewer activities actually take place. But it is something I really want to do. Both myself and whoever's on the Task and Finish group and the working group, to get that comprehensive understanding of what is delivered from each of the buildings that we currently have, and perhaps seeing actually whether other things could be delivered from them. As I said earlier, we're actually, as a council, not using this fantastic physical network at all well. We're using it incredibly inefficiently, and maybe there is opportunity for co-location of other council services that would contribute to the library's budget if they were offering advice, children's facilities, whatever it might be, from libraries.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you. I think we are in danger of unanimity in this room that the proposal that's been recommended is not a good one. I think we all know how valuable libraries are, and we all know that there are good things that happen within them that wouldn't happen anywhere else. I don't know if you've got any exciting things to say about the library in my ward, but as it happens, my daughter is going to an event in your ward, in your library this evening, which is her and one of her school friends goes to a thing called the Crochet Club, which is organised by people that do that in that community, and it wouldn't happen anywhere else, and it's a good thing. I think the two most remarkable things or notable things that you said, there's a lot of things that you said, Stephen, that I agree with, as I've said, and two of those were that, first of all, that we should recommend a saving or a change or a reform that's different to the one that's being proposed, because the one that's being proposed is not, you said you want a better service, we all agree with that, but the proposal is to halve the libraries, and that's not better, that's worse, and we all know the impact of that, and I think you know the impact of that as well as anyone else. And the second thing you said was that we should have a good look at the service that we want. I think we all agree with that. And there are some really good practice in our libraries that we want to see more of. One of the things that's happening in my ward is that a library that's currently a standalone building that's closed a certain amount of the time is going to move to a community centre And that will result in a better service. It will be a better community centre, first of all, as well as a better library service. There are a couple of other examples, Southmead and elsewhere, where that model is being used. Of course, we could do that more. What we need, which I think what you want, is a library strategy that says what is a good library, what is a good library service, and how can we deliver that. I think there would be an appetite in the city to come to agreement about what that would mean and to support that and to get councillors on side across all wards about what that would mean. What we have at the moment is not that. What we have at the moment is gutting the service that we've got because we say we can't afford it, irrespective of all the wonderful things that libraries do and irrespective of all the other disbenefits that would happen to community if people didn't have places to do their homework or do all the other things that libraries do apart from providing a library service. So I think we all think that, and I know we're not supposed to say whether we think this is a good idea or a bad idea, and we're just commenting on the proposal that we've got. But indeed, but apparently the committee doesn't either in terms of the proposals gone forward. This proposal will do damage, and we all feel that, and there is an appetite to come up with something better. So surely we can come up with a better timescale and a better plan, because otherwise we will be forced into a corner that no one will be able to defend, and therefore an enormous cost won't happen.
Thank you, Councillor Logan, but I think it's also a very clear fact that the libraries in the current format are not giving us much. In fact, they're costing us a lot of money, and there needs to be reformation within the system, and I think the Task and Finish group will look at that when it's established. Councillor Williams?
Yes, Chair, I entirely agree with what Councillor Logan has just said. And I was trying to guess what your ward was. I didn't know, but I think it is Philwood. And of course, there is a major investment taking place, and something similar is planned for Southby. And of course, in the past, these changes have happened as well. So Cheltenham Road Library was closed, converted into flats, and a brand new one was built in a better part of Gloucester Road, which is now the best used library in the facility. And the flats above it probably contributed to the capital cost of doing that. Junction 3 would be another example that's happened in recent years. So in the past, previous administrations have taken decisions to close one building and perhaps have a better service offered from a new building somewhere else. And that might be something we have scope to do if the capital programme allows us to do that. I think we have to be open-minded about where we go. I'm accepting, because I have collective responsibility, I've been in this position wearing other hats before, that budgetary savings need to be made across the council. So I'm not here to say that the status quo budget should be maintained, because I think that's unrealistic, but the status quo budget is also delivering a pretty shoddy service at the moment. So I'm accepting there needs to be a budget cut, but I think it needs to be a shave rather than a scalping. And it's a scalping that's in the £42 million that Mr Rothery has in his savings in development at the moment, and I do not support that, and I do not think it will fly at full council, but a number one haircut might improve the look and encourage us to come up and use our imagination to deliver a library service we can be proud of, rather than one that we are actually, frankly, faintly embarrassed about at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think we've had a thorough debate about and kind of observations about the library proposals. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say? And then, if not, then I can allow Councillor Williams to sum up, because we have another portfolio to get through.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to touch on the proposed reduction in spend on domestic abuse services. We obviously heard the public forum interest in this earlier, and it's clearly a very emotive issue, which is close to many of us. I just want to make sure my understanding from the papers is correct, please. So, do I understand right, the funding, it's unallocated currently, so removing it doesn't impact any services we're providing at the moment, but I suppose the extension of that, it might impact our ability to provide new services quickly in that area.
I'll attempt to answer that, but the Director of Public Health is here to supplement what I say if necessary. It's £140,000 that I think is being proposed to be removed from next year's budget. The vast majority of that is for a programme that is actually ended. So it was budgeted to continue into the next financial year. It was a joint programme with Christine's department, if I can call it that I think was mainly about keeping a child from a family where one of the parents was abusive, but keeping them with the non-abusive parent. That programme has gone through its journey. I don't know how successful or otherwise that was. Christine could perhaps have answered that question, but it has now come to an end so that budget can be released back to the general fund next year. The £40,000 balancing figure is from a current vacancy that the service thinks that the remaining staff in sexual violence and domestic abuse will be able to cope with no detriment to the service. So it's a current vacancy that we're suggesting we don't need to fill.
Thank you. That was actually going to be my follow-up, if I may be permitted, Chair. Are the officers here able to assure us that that is something that can happen? They can absorb that extra workload of that vacancy? I'm always a bit nervous when I see things like this in the papers because, again, it can seem a bit over-optimistic sometimes.
Well, Chair, I've been given that assurance by the heads of service, relevant heads of service, but they are here, so I'll let them speak.
Thank you, and thank you for your interest in this matter. Absolutely, we wouldn't want to take any money out of this budget at all, but needs must. This is 140,000 out of a 1.4 million local authority budget. In addition, we get about 1.2 million from the government. So there's still a very large amount of investment in this programme, which remains very high priority. We are absorbing the staffing costs within our public health team. So we have 2 people. We have Carol here, head of service. It's not her only area of work, but it is a significant area of her work. So we've got very senior oversight over the programme, and we've got a number of staff who are dedicated to the work.
Thank you very much. That's very reassuring, and thank you to you and your team for the work you do in this very vital area. I would very quickly flag, not as a question, but there are some no boxes ticked in the EQIA under disproportionate impact for this, and I think I'm not sure how that's appropriate given the obvious implications of domestic abuse services and what they fund, but is that maybe a reflection of the fact this isn't an ongoing service which is being cut?
Yeah, that's right. So the equality impact assessment won't be focused on domestic abuse services per se. We're able to make this saving without any impact at all on either the quality of the commissioning service or our current extensive service delivery. So that's why there would be no impact. There'll be no impact from this saving, not that domestic abuse services wouldn't have an impact, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Councillor Blake.
It's on this domestic violence stuff. I just feel it sends a really terrible signal. That's for me. I know I don't mean virtual signalling. That's not, we shouldn't be in that game, right? But when there's so much focus on it from government and from us, we had a golden motion on violence against women and girls. Here, there's a whole raft of things that the outside agencies said we ought to be doing that we're not currently doing. I just think it just sends that signal that says that, okay, we're going to penny pinch right here. And actually, for me, it's something that actually, we shouldn't be doing. We should include it. It gives us, it's a very small amount of money in the scheme of things, the amount of money we're spending on this. But I think it sends a signal to women, particularly vulnerable women in society, that we're taking this absolutely seriously and that we're not allowing any line of money to go out of that line. And I don't think it's virtual signalling. I think it's about setting an ambition that this council is completely focused on domestic violence and will do everything possible to make sure we play our full part in it.
If I thought it would reduce the impact of the service that is offered in this very important area, I would have blocked it as soon as it was mentioned. But I was reassured that the vast majority of this, Chair, the 100,000, is from a programme that is actually ended. It doesn't exist anymore, but it had a budget allocation in the year that we're looking at going forward. So there is no cut to anything because it's already stopped. So the remaining 40,000 is for a staff vacancy, that isn't going to be filled, and the team assured me that will have no forward detriment on the very important service they offer to people in the city. I'm committed to this area, Chair, and I have members of the committee, as Councillor Blake will know, my Vice Chair, Councillor Clark, and Lisa, Rob's colleague as well, are very committed to this area. But I think the whole committee is united that this is important work, and we wouldn't want to see any detriment to it.
Thank you. I don't have any more indications. So, Councillor Williams, if you can just sum up, just make your final observations, and then I will pass to transport and
I'm aware I'm running into my tea time and everyone else's tea time and Councillor Plowden's question time as well. So I think we've had a good discussion, and I'll just leave it there. And thank you for your questions.
Thank you very much. So if I can now turn to transport and connectivity, Councillor Plowden.
Thank you, and nice to see you all, albeit late in the day. I think if you look at all the committee, just a few opening remarks from me, if you look at all of the committee budgets, and I've scanned through all the different papers, transport is the one that starts with an income target of 14.6 million as its gross figure. So every other committee starts by spending money from the general fund. Transport is basically now self-financing. On top of that, actually, the transport levy is not paid from the transport budget. It's paid separately, and that is from the CAS income. And I think we've got maybe a bit of a medium-term pressure as the CAS income starts to decline, but we've got plans to look at other sources of income to offset that. I think it's also worth mentioning that income from on-street parking is strictly ring-fenced to transport investment or revenue spend by Section 55, I think, of the 1984 Road Traffic Regulation Act. So Section 55 means that we cannot make decisions around parking based on budgets, but we can forecast the revenue generated from those. So in summary, we've thrown the book at every possible saving here, and even ones unlike maybe on domestic violence, which might have an impact on services. We've put them all in because most of them are reasonable and have manageable income impacts. Not all of them are in the bag, and if you'll see the way it's profiled, some of them will not hit in the next year, they'll hit in subsequent years. For example, things about parking will require committee approval and will be subject to TROs and statutory consultation. And if we were to increase the CAS fees in line with inflation, that would require JACU, Joint Air Quality Unit approval up at central government. When you look at staffing, so that's both enforcement and engineering design, counterintuitively, if you increase the amount of staff you've got, you actually bring in more income. So that's just something to bear in mind. As those of you who came to the briefing session before Christmas will know, the two most difficult ones from my point of view, which will have the impact out there in the city, are charging for disabled parking bays and the school crossing patrols. I think both of these are going to have the greatest impact not only on the city but people with protected characteristics. These probably would be cut by commissioners in the event of us declaring Section 114, so that's really why they're on the list, because they're not necessarily statutory services. I think it's worth saying that if one of our aims is preventative approach, that school crossing patrols encouraging children and often their parents and siblings to travel actively to school is a very good preventative measure, a very healthy thing to be doing. And if they're removed, more people may choose to drive, and that could increase the danger for those particularly deprived people who may not be able to afford a car and would still be travelling actively. You've seen actually from the answers to the public forum that one way to reduce the impact of taking out school crossing patrols is to install zebras where possible, but often actually the patrol is there specifically because it's not a simple site to do this, and it's not really the same as a proactively attended patrol. The staff have already been reduced from about 65 to about 42 by the previous Labour administration back in 2017, based on removing the least dangerous and needed sites. So we're already at the more priority sites across the city here. We can also review to need them, as it says in the public forum answer, on an ongoing basis as we roll out school streets, as we roll out livable neighbourhoods, and as we put in other measures to try and improve road safety overall. On disabled bays, and the saving is so negligible, it would be a pity to take it forward. If we were to do that, then I would definitely want to see some sort of SLA in place to make sure that people aren't waiting an undue amount of time, something we're already working to improve anyway, but I think we would, for actually charging people, we really need to have some sort of SLA in process. So we've already done the work to let the patrol staff know and schools know that this is a potential proposal, because we didn't want them to hear about it from the media. And I think this will have the biggest negative impact. It will be controversial as well. So if there is any headroom, then these are two savings I'd really like not to take forward. I'd like to sort of hear your views on that, not least as the actual savings are relatively and absolutely quite small. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the floor for questions. So, now, you've all indicated almost at the same time. So, if I go to Councillor Hucker first.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is very brief. I completely agree with you, Ed. These are the, I think, two most unpalatable suggestions in the document, and I think we do have a little bit of wriggle room, and if we have, then I would like to see these removed if possible.
That's really good to hear, and I hope we've got that wriggle room.
Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. I will echo Councillor Hucker. I'll echo Councillor Hucker on that. I think, these are the most unpalatable savings. I think, the adaptations and accommodations for disabled people to enable them to take part in society in a more accessible way, those shouldn't be charged for. That's a sort of fundamental principle, really. I think a lot of us would share. And equally, school crossing patrols, it's a really important thing for children and their families. As you say, it's a preventative measure, so if there is any headroom, I fully support not taking those savings options forward. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, I think, was next. No, Councillor Logan.
I suspect we're all going to say the same thing on school crossing patrols, which is the ones that exist are the ones that last time this was reviewed people thought were most critical to safety. And about an hour ago we had quite an impassioned speech from your colleague saying how important children's services and the safety of children is, and it seems remarkable that that's on the list. So my question on that is, what is the assessment of the impact on children's safety, and when will we know that? But my second question is not about either of these things that you've highlighted. It's about linear parking charges, because that all sounds very bureaucratic, doesn't it? It also all sounds very neat. But my question is, what is the assessment of the impact on the nighttime economy? Because one of the things in Bristol is the nighttime economy is a success. People want to come to the centre of Bristol, and that's a good thing about this city. But they might not if they have to pay £10 or £15 to do so. But my note about that is that there was a motion passed, I think unanimously, at the recent council on a safe travel home. And it would be a mistake if we end up with a model that goes against that and makes it harder for people to work in the nighttime economy and harder for the nighttime economy to thrive.
I'm going to take that one first, which is in fact, you may have seen me typing away whilst other people are up, and that's specifically because I'm working with the Nighttime Economy SAR or Revisor or whatever she's called, Carly Heath, to try and bring together businesses from the nighttime economy in 2 weeks' time to go through the proposals and try and work out the best way to put these in place. At the moment, I think it's remarkably good value. I think it's £5 to park a car for 4 hours. We get a lot of complaints from people who turn up at, say, 5 o'clock for an evening out, and then they're very confused about the tariff, because between 5 and 6 you're paying an hourly rate, and then you're paying a flat rate. So I actually think we can do something which is fairer and more easily understood, that people actually pay for the amount of time they use. And having modelled that, and we've got a certain amount of information, a lot of the people will actually end up paying less, because they'll be staying for 2 or 3 hours rather than several hours. So we've got a number of, quite a lot of information about the sort of way that people use the car parks in the city centre as it is. We'll be taking those through a group of people through the Bristol Knights group. I do think it's worth remembering that for the price of 2 people, you can get up to 5 adults on a bus. So I do think we also need to look at the fact that bus fares are going up, and the people make quite sensible choices. So I think what we don't want to do is where bus fares are going up and not to sort of do something about car parking charges and end up with many more people thinking that actually the car is a good option.
If you are doing that assessment of the impact on the nighttime economy with those people, that's fantastic. That's the right thing that we'd want to hear.
Okay.
It'd be good to know if we'd have that assessment before the council makes its final decision on this.
We've absolutely delayed this. You'll see that any income from this is profiled not, I think, to hit until next year or even the year after. So, and we will actually probably take some of that, the outcomes of that discussion into the Task and Finish group that's actually talking about parking, and it's already sitting. So, really wanting to, this didn't get through committee, first time we took it. So we've taken it back, we've got a number of different options, and we've really tried to make that better. In terms of school crossing patrols, I think the only way we can really take that forward is if we did have to make some cuts, we'd do a case-by-case assessment. What you tend to do is you look at the number of pedestrians using a crossing and times the number of vehicles squared, because that's the source of the danger. And then you'd, I mean, the impact, I think, generally speaking, when we did this before, the impact was less because some of those didn't meet that threshold, and or there are other factors on each individual site. If we had to take them all out, I think there would be a problem, and I think we've heard a lot of people, and I think we'll hear a lot more if this becomes a real proposal, saying that it's going to make them much more worried about the safety of their children.
Councillors, can I just remind you we have 3 minutes to go for this meeting. It's been a good quality conversation that we've had. I don't want to interrupt anybody, but Councillor Blake, and then hopefully we can wrap up.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to repeat the stuff on the school crossings, which is going down pretty badly, isn't it? Let's be honest. Let's be honest with you. But my point about disabled parking bays, I think that's. I'm really pleased, Ed, that you've said that that's one that you want to take away. I certainly know lots of individuals that just about cope, to be honest with you, with their disability, managing to have a car or mobility. That's the only ability for them to get out and about. And I think if we were to introduce fees for this, it would just be another sort of tipping point, another pressure that they perhaps don't need. So I'm glad you've indicated that you'd like to try and remove that.
Councillor Plowden, can I ask you to respond, but also to then sum up, and so we can close the meeting?
Frankly, for £90,000, that's kind of such a small amount of money. It seems a really poor thing. When I get ward correspondence of people who've been waiting for a disabled parking bay, and I hear the sort of impact on their lives of not having one, or when it's been painted, when we've done some surface dressing and it's disappeared for a little while, I really hear the impact on individual people. For £90,000, I think that's probably not even within the sort of risk envelope of some of the very large cuts we're making elsewhere. So I'd really like to see this one removed. I don't really have anything else to say other than... sorry. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say other than some of these obviously need to get through the parking charges, and some of the other policy decisions need to get through committee, so they're not necessarily in the bag. There is some risk there.
So that concludes today's session, and so I'm going to formally adjourn today's meeting so that we can continue the conversation at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Once again, thank you to all members that have contributed. Thank